Today we're going to go over the 5 primary pieces of home insurance that most people are missing that could cost them thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on their insurance. What they're noticing is whenever you get promoted from the cheaper price or the cheaper deal and we've got the better rates, most of the time people don't realize that they're actually getting lower coverage for those rates. Part of it's the quality of the company, because in insurance you really do get what you pay for. Either bad claim service to get a cheaper deal, usually not the right agent that even cares or takes the time to even wonder what you have to carry or even care, and then also the coverages that you carry. So the 5 main pieces that I see the most often that people are missing or get removed from their policy, let's dive into it. Number 1 is the replacement cost of your home. When your home is created, there's what's called a replacement cost estimate. And that's essentially not the value of your home. If you go to Zillow, you'll notice that your house might be worth X amount. Let's just say $500,000 in this case. Your house may cost $700,000 to rebuild because the cost of inflation or the cost of lumber has gone up. The cost to buy that piece of wood, to replace that wall, to buy the drywall, to put the wall back, to buy the piping, to hire a plumber, to hire an electrician, all of those costs have gone up. And the cost to replace a home is 10 to 15% more than it was the last few years. Because of all of those inflation pieces, the replacement cost of your home is what's costing the most. So what are people typically missing with this coverage? You want to make sure that you have full replacement cost on your home, and then you also want to have 2 things that you could think of. One is inflation guard. So for those that want to protect what you're paying, there's a really inexpensive coverage called inflation guard, which means even though inflation goes up, we're not going to raise your rate because of it. We'll give you those extras, but we're not going to charge you more. The other part that people are typically missing is the replacement cost of the home. So you can do what's called an extended replacement cost, and it's not very expensive to do. So doing an extension is usually 25, sometimes 50%, sometimes 100%. Let's take that $500,000 house. If that $500,000 house was a total loss, let's just say it was $600,000 to rebuild, not to replace, and you have $500,000 worth of coverage, if you have an additional 25%, you're going to have that extra money to replace the home and rebuild it correctly. The nice part is a lot of these coverages do come in packages where you can get that along with the second one, which is water backup. Most people are missing water coverage for sewer and backup. Now, there's a couple pieces to this that can get a little bit complicated. That's where talking to an agent does make sense. If you are shopping and you're looking for an agent to give you the advice, I'll put a link in the description below where you can work with a local independent agent that shops it with multiple companies. That way you can also get the coverage you need, but find the company that's the best fit for your scenario. The location, your credit, if you're doing auto with it, all of those pieces create what's called a profile, and that all builds up to give you the right price based on what the company is looking for. So matching you with the correct company makes a huge difference. I'll put that link in the description below if you are shopping for any type of home or auto insurance. So how do we uncomplicate this? We've got the water backup. There's sewer and drain, water backup. Those are the same thing. It's just different companies calling them different things. There's a third piece which can just be labeled behind walls. It could be called mold. It could be called seepage. It's essentially behind the wall if you don't see something happening. Typically your water backup won't cover long-term leaks, drips behind your fridge, things that pipes are dripping and leaking, you don't realize it, and all of a sudden there's mold in your ceiling, and all of a sudden it's too late because they don't cover mold in almost every scenario unless the company offers a coverage for that. Now that water backup is anything backing up. So if water comes back in, if you flush a toilet, it bubbles out, it comes off. The sink gets clogged, it comes out, it overflows. The tub overflows. Obviously, it can't be neglected and you just left it alone. You can't be negligent in this scenario. But in general, if you have water trying to leave the house, some homes like Michigan have what's called a sump pump, and it's supposed to pump any excess water out of the house. You'd be surprised how many of those are installed incorrectly, and the water backs up and just goes right back in the house. I've actually had 2 claims in my life on that exact same scenario. If a pipe bursts in the house, that's something totally separate. That's usually just covered under what's called coverage A. So if your home in general has coverage, that's coverage A, and that's going to cover a pipe bursting. Again, in insurance, for a claim to be active and for them to pay on it, it has to be sudden and incidental. It can't be a drip. It can't be a long-term piece. That's where that mold comes into play, because mold indicates that it's been there for several weeks or longer. Otherwise, mold doesn't form. And by the forming of that mold, that gives an insurance company kind of an out, I guess some people would call it, but it just means that they're not covering it. It's listed in the policy. They've already told you ahead of time, and it feels like they're scamming you, but at the end of the day, unless they're the ones that are neglectful and can't get to your fix and repair quickly enough, then in that case, it's going to be a scenario. Keep in mind, if you have a claim, you are responsible to shut off the water, to stop and prevent any further damage. Otherwise, your insurance can kick back and say, we're not going to cover the majority of this. So yes, you can add mold coverage to some policies. It's fairly rare, but some will allow you to do mold in addition. So usually you'll cover $10 to $25 to $50,000 worth of water backup or even the mold recovery. The third piece, which I honestly think is probably the most important, is where people get scammed the most, is something called wind and hail. Most people just call it roof coverage because 9 times out of 10, it's either the siding or the roof that get knocked off with wind. If the wind comes, rips off shingles, you have damage on the roof, then you need it replaced. But what a lot of agents have started to do, and even some companies have only offered higher deductibles just to cut costs. In most cases, people carry $1,000 deductible. That's the most common for home. In most cases, some companies will do 2.5% to 5% or 2% wind and hail deductible. Let's go back and take that $500,000 house. What's 2% of $500,000? That's a $10,000 deductible for wind and hail. So if you notice that your policy has a 2%, you're probably saving $100 to a couple $100 a year on your home insurance. But if you have a claim, you're probably costing yourself close to, if not more, than $10,000. If you have a $250,000 house, it's half that. So a 2% would be $5,000. If you're happy with the deductible and you want to save the few hundred a year, there you go. But at least you know that that's the deductible that you should be carrying. And I think too many agents don't spend enough time explaining what they're doing when they say that. They're just showing you the number. Now, some companies have taken it on themselves to show you that as well. So there are some companies that are really nice and saying, here's a 2%, and then they put the amount next to it. So that's really beneficial to kind of show you if you had a wind and hail claim, then you're paying X amount of money out of pocket before the insurance will even kick in. Again, a lot of this has to do with the agent. If the agent is, I guess you could say, scamming you or not explaining to you correctly, that's something that you need to be aware of and make sure that you have the right policy in place. The third and a major piece is something called full content, full replacement. So it's contents, full replacement essentially is the line item. And what that means is your personal belongings, any contents in the house. If you could take the house and shake it, pull it up, and anything that fell out, that's your contents. That's your contents coverage. Your shoes, your TV, your couch, your watches, all of those things that have individual items around the home is typically several hundred or 100,000 plus coverage. But if you don't have full replacement, which by the way is pretty inexpensive to add, then you're not fully covered on your items. That just means that you're getting what's called actual cash value. It's kind of like your car. The older an item is, the less it's worth. So if I have a really nice watch, it's a $1,000 watch, and it's 12 years old. It's probably only worth $300, and I'm only going to get $300 for my $1,200 watch. Keep in mind, some items, usually more than $1,000 or $1,500, have to be scheduled separately. So talk to your agent about that as well. But in general, that item, you want to make sure that you have full replacement. That doesn't mean that it's going to give me $1,200. That means that if it's worth $1,200 at the time to replace it, that means the newest version of this watch might be $1,600. That means I'm going to get $1,600 instead of the $1,200 because I can't buy the same watch anymore for the same cost. That's the benefit that you get by having full replacement cost on your personal belongings. The fifth is kind of a combination of a lot of things. So most homeowners policies allow you to combine and do what's called a package. They call them Optimum or Supreme or Pace or endorsements, all of these things that can blanket and help you benefit by giving you more coverage for many things. One of those packages that typically come with extra jewelry. So if you have more than $1,500 worth of jewelry, or you have one item that's worth more than $1,500, but not more than $2,500. So typically that will allow you to do a blanket coverage. A lot of the times these packages come with those extra pieces. covers more money, covers more credit if it's stolen, covers different things that you could add on at a lower amount. And I'm going to add one other sub piece that you probably should be aware of, which is service line coverage. Service line coverage is depending on the age of your home. If your home's more than 50 years old, you're going to want to make sure you know what kind of pipes you have. If you have any galvanized pipes in the home, add the service line coverage, because what the home is one piece. The connection to your home is another. So let's say from the road to your house, there's pipes, there's wires, there's all sorts of things that get to your house to allow water to evacuate, to add water to the home, to give electricity. There's different service lines that can be there. And it can be something as simple as a guy comes, fixes the porch, but they drive on the grass, and that breaks one of the pipes, and you find out a year later or 6 months later, there's no way to prove that the guy did it. They're not covering it. Whatever the case is, your insurance won't cover that unless you have that service backup or service line coverage as well. You can add usually 10 to 20,000 depending on how much you want, but those are really big things to have. Now there's a lot more that we can cover. We're going to cover in future videos, things like matching, roof, siding, all of the additional pieces that you could have on your home. If you want to know more about the home coverages, I've got a playlist that will go over all of the dwelling A, B, C, D, all of the main coverages that you would expect on your home. That video will be here and helpful for you to watch next. If you're just kind of trying to figure out what is a home policy built of, what's the quick 101, just give me 15 minutes and show me everything I need to know. Here's the summary of all of the main pieces that you should be aware of. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.